I sought out men that were, emotionally unavailable because when they did give me attention, it was like, whoa, that dopamine in my brain was like, yes, yes, that's what I want.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining me. My name is Reesa and I'm your host. We are talking to real families about real stories here on The Real Family Eats, where we've got food for thought and thoughtful food. So let's eat. Hey everyone, thank you for joining us today. I have the lovely Julie back again, interviewing with us today, and I'm so very, very grateful. And I say back again because, to be real, we had some technical difficulties last time, and so Julie was gracious enough to be able to come back and let us try this one more time. So hi Julie, thank you again for coming back.
No problem, no problem. I understand.
Well, Julie, for anybody who doesn't know you like I do, can you introduce yourself for us?
Yeah, sure. My name's Julie Hernandez. I'm 39 years old, mother of three, cat mom of three, and I've been a nurse for about over a decade, but I have a lot of different hats that I've worn prior to that.
Yeah. And a full house with six little things that you're
Yes,
taking care of.
all the time. It's just nonstop, all the time.
Yeah, I imagine so. And so before we kind of jump into your story and your recipe, which I'm super excited about, is there any socials that you want to share with us or any resources for our shameless plug section that you want to share to our audience?
Yeah, sure. So I'm just, a normal person on social media, so you can always reach out to me if you have any questions or, just want to chit chat. So I'm Julie Hernandez pretty much on most social platforms. But one plug that I do want to place is called Credible Minds, credibleminds.com. They do a lot of prevention and early interventional mental health services. Through my work, we have that platform attached to our website, but you can reach them through crediblemind.com from anywhere.
Awesome. And so through your work, what are some of the ways that you partner with them? How do they help out?
So we have them placed on our website, and we also, because we deal directly with the community on many different issues, first come the needs, right? We deal with the needs, and then we kind of throw in there, by the way, we have this resource on our website. It's also a free resource. So we just kind of throw that in there. So it's very helpful for our community who's uninsured or underinsured, which, it's very hard to get mental health resources sometimes. So just kind of letting them know you can reach it through our website or online, and it's free for anyone.
Wonderful. That's such an awesome resource because you're absolutely right. And that spans just the whole country, right? Of maybe limited resources and being able to kind of get connected in that way, especially for our underserved populations. Yeah. So I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And folks, as always, we'll make sure that everything is linked in our show notes so you can find all of those resources as well as the socials down below. So check that out. Okay, Julie, so what recipe are you teaching us today and why did you choose this one?
So today it's Mexican rice. Some people call it the red Mexican rice. There's different kinds. But it's just one of those staples in a Mexican household that I grew up in. So it just brings back a lot of, nostalgia, a lot of nice childhood feelings. And it's really easy to make, and it's very inexpensive to make. So it's just something you can add on to just about anything.
Yeah. And I just want to plug that inexpensive piece of it because I normally take my kids with me to grocery shop as well, and we like, to keep them engaged because that's what works best for our house. We do like a guessing game of what is my total going to be, and they were blown away by the smaller number. We were under $10 when we were buying all of this, and so they were just like, really? That's it?
Yes. Yeah.
So
And
even the
it'll
kids are
last
very
you a
shocked.
while. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would echo that. Absolutely, kind of more on the economical side. So that's really awesome. Okay, so tell me what the steps are for this, and I'll get things going while we chat.
Sure. I mean, so it depends. You can make your own sauce. You can buy sauce. You can blend it. So what I did was blend tomatoes, onions together with some water. You can add some salt and seasoning in there and you blend it together. Or you can
Okay.
just put tomato sauce in there. It's really up to you. Just kind of depends on preference, really. And then
Yeah.
when you do that, yeah, you get that ready and you're kind of getting everything else ready, your pan, your rice.
Okay. Perfect. So should I saute kind of the onions in here in the pan first?
You
Um,
can. That's something you can do. Yep. I prefer to saute onions. It just brings the flavor out a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. And then once I've got that all, and then I use my sauce. Do I put my rice in first and kind of get that toasty?
So yeah, you want to brown your rice a little bit too. You just kind of want to stir it with the oil in there and just kind of
Okay.
brown it just a little bit. And
Perfect.
you
And
don't
then
have to
once
rinse it. I know, yeah, some people rinse the rice. You don't have to. It's
okay. So to each his own for the rinsing
yeah,
part.
yeah,
And then so after it's nice and brown, that's when we add the sauce.
correct.
Perfect. And
Yeah,
then we just cook
you
it
kind
up.
of just Mhm. Yeah, and then you just want to kind of continuously just stir it, kind of keep an eye on it.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, that sounds pretty straightforward. I can do that. Not a problem. So while I'm doing that, though, I know that one of the stories that you were so graciously willing to kind of share with us is a little bit about your journey, as far as even just on the mental health side and dealing with, relationships that were maybe not necessarily the peak of health that you were kind of looking for. And so I'd love to kind of hear more about that. Walk us through kind of what you've experienced in some of that journey.
Yeah. I just want to preface this with I feel I'm the kind of person that I believe that all humans are innately good and nobody goes into relationship, wanting to be hurt or left or anything like that. It's just life.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, I'm a single mother of three. I am in a relationship. I'm partnered at the moment. That took, I was single for a few years, but my three kids have different fathers, and that was kind of each relationship was different. It was
Mm,
challenging, but it's one of those things that you don't in it until you're in it. You don't
okay.
know until you know, kind of, situations. But with my daughter's father, we were very young. It was, one of those things where I would not say volatile, but it's just one of those things where um, I, I remember someone telling me that you find partners. Sometimes you search for partners that are similar to the relationships you saw when you were a child, or
Hmm.
maybe you look for partners that kind of remind you of your father. For me, in my instance, and I was like, oh, I don't know what they're talking about. But as I've gotten older and I've reflected, about, on my relationships, I'm like, oh man, they might not be completely off,
Oh,
but
wow. Okay.
yeah, yeah, because I'm looking back, especially, with my oldest, her. her father was a lot like my father growing up. So it's just very interesting, going into therapy and opening these boxes open and kind of like, oh, that's interesting, qualities that, growing up, I was not, maybe not super attentive on my, father. And then I realized it's certain qualities that I see in men that I, gravitate towards. And I have to be much more aware of what I'm doing when it comes
Yeah.
to relationships and that sort of thing.
I'm so curious for you, at least in your experience, why do you think that that is something that you were drawn to personally?
That's so I wish I knew. I think, and it goes again, I've spent many years in therapy again, 'cause I just like, why do I do this? I don't
Hmm.
understand why I'm doing this. And it's the relationships or the type of parenting that I had as a child. My parents are immigrants. They're
Hmm.
first generation, they're from Mexico. And, as we all know, parenting is very different, um, in different generations, but especially in immigrant countries, it's a lot different than, what we know of today.
Yeah.
And, you have to give them grace. They were not parented well.
Hmm.
They were treated as, child labor pretty much. And, my parents were doing the best they could, but they did not know how to have patience with us, give us attention the way we needed it. So it was one of those things where, I sought out men that were, emotionally unavailable, because when they did give me attention, it was like, woof, that dopamine in my brain
Hmm.
was like, yes, yes, that's what I want. And then when they
Yeah.
would pull away, I would just, that was, it was just an interesting dynamic. And I didn't realize it until later. I'm like, that's kind of like the relationship I had with my parents. We're very busy, working very hard, you
Hmm.
know, but they're busy. They were working several jobs. And then when I did get attention from them, it was just like that hit to your brain as a child. So when you grow up
Yeah.
like that, you seek out relationships like that. And then you end up in a relationship that's healthy, and then you're like, this is boring. Why are they always so
Yeah.
nice to me and attentive? This is weird. Like, I don't know what to do with this.
Yeah, absolutely. And that makes a ton of sense. I feel like I've worked with several, parents who say, something similar where it's this is what you know. And so that's kind of what you're used to, what you're comfortable in. And so then, like you said, when you see it in others, it's like, oh yeah, this is kind of what love looks like, right? This is because this
Right.
is what I know. This is what I've been kind of seeing as far as that demonstration of what love looks like. So yeah, this makes sense versus
Yeah.
like you said when you have something different it's like oh yeah this is strange let's move
Right.
on.
Yeah. I still remember that thought crossing through my mind when I was with my son's father, my second child. And I'm like, this is like different. This is interesting. Granted, there was a lot of things that we also, had to work on. The communication was barely there. It was more than what I was used to, but there's still a lot of things that we had to work on. We have since, divorced, but it's very amicable. We've grown a lot. Again, and we've both gone to therapy, and we've realized what went wrong in our relationship. But we get
Mm,
along really well for our son, and it's just one of those relationships I'm very proud of to have. Because I'm like, you know what, the marriage didn't work, that chapter closed, but this new chapter, this friendship we can have, this partnership we can have for our son, it's positive because we've realized what was wrong. We've gone to therapy, we've worked on things, and we've matured, and it works out really well now. But yeah,
yeah.
it's definitely I had one of those moments where I was like, wow, this is this is interesting. This is kind of boring. Those were the words that came out of my mouth. I'm like, why am I saying that? Like, why? But yeah, if you're used to chaos, that's kind of what your brain, as a child, that's so important. When you're raised like that, that's what your wiring is made of. And to change that as an adult, it takes a lot of work. I'm like, it's possible, but it's,
Hmm.
it takes a lot of work, a lot of consistency. And yeah, it's just interesting how that wiring as a child affects you as an adult, all of your relationships as an adult.
Yeah, absolutely. And I imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it's not necessarily something that your parents were aware of. So it wasn't something kind of intentionally as far as that wiring, but more that, when there's that lack of awareness, that lack of knowledge, that it sounds like now having been in these things, like you said, years of therapy of learning and almost having to like, it sounds like relearning and almost reparenting yourself in a way
Yeah,
that you were able to kind of have that insight, that aha, versus like
yeah.
when you're in it and you don't know anything different, you're not necessarily seeking out or being taught anything different. I imagine it's not something in the forefront.
It's definitely not for the faint of heart, but I feel like anyone can do it. It's one of those things that, again, with consistency, anyone can do it. It's hard. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna say, oh, it's so easy to show up to therapy and it just magically happens. It's a lot of, you take two steps forward, a step back, step sideways, a step,
Yeah.
and it's difficult, but it's so worth it, especially for me personally, just with my kids, just knowing that I'm able to raise them in a different way than what I was raised, in a more positive atmosphere. And don't get me wrong, it's not perfect.
Hmm.
I try to gentle parent these children, but they don't gentle child sometimes. I'm like, please just listen to what I'm saying. Please just
Please, I'm
listen to
trying really hard.
the words that are coming out of my mouth. Please just listen to them. And they're
Yeah.
just like, no.
So you speak to a wall sometimes too. I know the
Yes,
feeling.
often, often.
Yeah, and then you take them in though to, I feel like at least mine, I can't speak for you, but mine, you take them into the doctor and they do the hearing test, and they say, oh,
Yeah,
their hearing's fine. And it's like,
yeah, oh yeah. I'm like,
well
really?
then,
Can you check again? Yeah, maybe it's my
then what's
voice.
the
It's
issue?
too tinny. My voice is too tinny. It's out of their sound frame.
Right?
Oh
So
goodness,
it's like
these
right
children.
out of that register.
Oh, absolutely.
That's actually a perfect segue because I was going to ask you, do you find or have you found thus far that some of the struggles that you were seeing kind of on the relationship side, was that impacting your children at all? Was there something that you did in order to kind of contain that? What did that journey look like for you?
Yeah, I was very aware, at least when things were getting maybe difficult or heated. I tried not to argue or discuss things in front of my kids. And I know some people think, oh no, they should be, open to a lot of emotions. And yes, that's true. But at the same time, I just had this intuition in me that was like, I don't want to talk like this or discuss certain things around my kids or like certain behavior. So a lot of it was this hyper awareness of, I really don't want my children. When I was a kid, I would hear the arguments and things like that. They would argue a lot. It's very hard not to raise my kids now. If I raise my voice, they're just like, oh my gosh, because I try very hard not to raise my
Really?
voice. I once
Yeah.
heard this. I want to say he's an educator or a therapist, but he said, try to limit raising your voice because you raise your voice when there's an emergency. So if you're constantly raising your voice and then there is an emergency, they're not going to react to that. So for me,
Oh,
it's like,
interesting.
okay, I'm going to just, even if I have to take a 5-second breather and be like, okay, all right, we're not going to, yeah. So just
Yeah.
kind of being aware of the way I speak, what I say, even my body language, with my partners and with my kids. I try to be very aware of that, and try to keep them away from any heated discussions or anything. And you can't, protect them 100%.
Hmm.
But, even trying to do your best, I think that's important. Just, again, just being aware of situations or discussions, the way your voice is around your kids, your body language. Try to keep a lot of that negative or very aggressive things, if it happens, away from them, because I don't want them to I don't want them to have to go through that, but I do let
Yeah.
them know. I'm like, we're humans. Showing feelings is okay. And sometimes
Mm.
we have big feelings. It's okay to be mad. It's not okay to say mean words. It's not okay to put your hands on other people. That's not okay. Very okay to be mad though.
Yeah. And what I love about that, because I think sometimes just as a society in general, we kind of confuse the two in the sense of, um, oh, they're having a bad day. So, it's okay that
Mhm.
they talk to me in this way, or it's okay that they do these
Mhm.
things versus being able to kind of tease the two out, which it sounds like you're working hard to do with your kids, where the
Mhm.
emotion, that's absolutely natural and you are absolutely entitled to have your emotions. The behaviors that you choose when you're having those emotions are the things that we do have a
Mhm.
choice in. And so you have a choice of whether or not you want to speak
Yeah.
to somebody in that way, or like you said, put hands on somebody in that way, or you can choose something different. And just because you're
Mhm.
having, it sounds like a big emotion that might be overwhelming,
Mhm.
doesn't mean that it's just a free pass to kind of behave or choose behaviors that you want to do just because.
Yeah, correct. I tell them, my son, we work on that. I'm like, it's okay if you're upset. It's okay if that's bothering you. It's not okay to put your hands on someone. That is not okay. And I'm going to need you to step away. If you need to
Mm-hmm.
go to your room, I'm very much of a, do you need a break? I think children do. I need a break. You need 5 minutes, go ahead. My daughter is almost 4. She goes to her room by herself. She knows when she's being overstimulated. She knows when she's just over being around us. And I hear her walk away, close the door to her room. She needs 5 minutes. And then she comes back and she's fine. And, my partner, he saw that recently. He's just like, that's he's like, I barely know when to step away. I'm like, I'm telling you, I'm like, sometimes they listen, I guess. But I teach them, if you're having a very big emotion and you feel like you're not going to be able to, you know, keep your hands to yourself or not yell, then step away. It's okay. Go to your room.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also heard you mention that you for yourself in, when you were talking about making sure to kind of be mindful of your voice and the level of volume, if you will, that you had mentioned that sometimes it does take, hey, let me step over here, take some deep breaths so
Mhm.
I can come back to that. Is that a skill that you just innately have, or has that taken work?
Oh, that that has taken work, my friend. uh, I was very, when I was younger, I loved, you know, it was one of those things that was volatile or toxic, whatever you want to say. But when I would get into an argument with someone, a partner, anyone, it was almost like, yes, let's get into this. I'm going to do this with you. And I'm like,
Ooh.
as I got older, I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't like the consequences of when I say things when I'm angry.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like how I make people feel. I don't like how that made my relationship. I don't like how I felt after that.
Yeah.
So again, it's this just awareness, and it's with anything in life, whether it's mental health, physical health, if it has to do with your relationships, your job, but you have to have some sort of intention. You have to have consistency. It's not easy, and nobody's perfect. It's not, I'm not 100% there, but I try my very best when there's an argument or there's something going on. I'm like, I'm going to step away.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say something they don't really mean. And it's from this old behavior. And I need a minute. And I have to, again, with my partner, I have to explain to him, I'm not walking away from you. I'm not ignoring this discussion, but I
Mm-hmm.
know myself and I know that I need to step away. Just give me 5 minutes. We'll come back. We'll circle back. But right now, I need to step away. I
Yeah.
need to go just separate myself from this at the moment. And I can tell when I'm getting there. I can hear the monologue in my head. I can see how my body language is reacting. And I'm like, whoa, I need to step away.
Mm-hmm. And what I love about what you said is that it sounds like you are also working really hard to communicate with your partner kind of ahead of time. Maybe not in the heat of the moment, that hey, when I do step away, when I do need to take that time out, it's not, a reflection on you. It's not, necessarily because I'm walking, like you said, walking away from you. I want to walk towards you, and right now I can't, in a way that I want to show up, that sounds like is really important to you. And so because of that, I'm choosing to kind of take this time. And then it sounds like that key part for you is making that commitment to come back to it versus just, I know there are some people who they'll walk away. Walking away is no problem, but it's the coming back. And so then their partner goes, well, no, every time you walk away, you never come back. So no, we have to do it right now. You can't walk away, versus being able to, like you said, make that commitment to coming back to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, again, you have to come back to it. That is another part of it. And, hash out whatever has to be taken care of. Because I know some people, they're like, oh, I just drop it. I don't want to talk about it. It's like, no, you have to discuss this. Like, this has to be discussed, especially if it's a very important conversation. And again, it's a whole choose your battles sort of thing. Some things, will leave for discussion maybe another day, but if there are certain things that have an urgent, if they're urgent, it's best to just discuss them there. And sometimes, if someone who is in a healthy relationship, or you have friends who are in healthy relationships who know you personally, if you need someone to referee, bring someone in that you both trust, that it's like, hey, we need just someone to come in and be like, what's going on? Are you guys okay? If it gets that serious. And that's okay to ask for help, but that's also why it's important to surround yourself with people who are also, showing healthy habits, healthy relationships. That's one thing that I have found important as an adult, in a relationship, kind of having friends or family that, can help sometimes with discussing things.
Can you say more about that? Because I think that's such an interesting and important piece of, because you mentioned not just having anybody, like if you need a third party, observer, not just having any random person, but you specifically called out someone that you see as kind of having a healthy relationship. Why is that so important?
I feel it's important because sometimes you need, like I said, sometimes if there is a situation, and again, I know myself, sometimes I'm like, am I not seeing what he's saying? Am I just, am I not seeing his view on it, his side on it, what's going on? And sometimes it's nice to have someone that is going to be straight with you. Someone's going to be honest with you and be like, okay, hey, this is what he's trying to tell you, and you're being stubborn about this. Like, you need to just go back and discuss this again. Like, can you see his point of view on this? Can you, what's going on? Why are you being so defensive? Is it something that you don't want to bring up? And then it makes me think like, oh, maybe I am. Maybe there's something I'm being defensive about something. I'm afraid of this, X, Y, and Z is going to happen, and that's why I'm acting this way. And it's just nice to have someone who's going to be honest with you. I like that. I like having someone to just kind of like, hey, am I being, am I being extra, or is this?
Absolutely. And what I really appreciate about what you're saying there is it sounds like it's a conscious, again, going back to something that you said, a conscious choice to choose someone that, as you mentioned, is going to maybe be straight with you. I imagine that takes a degree of vulnerability to be open to not being right.
Yeah. 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 Oh, that vulnerability, it gets me every time. It's one of those things that I've also had to work on. It's like, my therapist would always tell me, because I spent several years single, and she's just, letting me know, she's like, being in a relationship is like one of the most vulnerable positions that you could be in, and I'm like, yeah, I don't like that. And she's like, why not? And I'm like, because they're gonna leave me. And she's like, if you find someone though, she's like, isn't it worth though, being, having that companionship, having that love and trust? She's like, is that worth more than the fear that you're holding on to? And I'm like, my God, I suppose. But, that's something I personally had to work through because, again, from my childhood, it was just like this fear of like, oh, man.
Yeah,
that vulnerability.
Absolutely. And, it is such a big component that I think some people maybe take for granted because sometimes I feel like people see vulnerability and they think weakness, but oh my goodness, it's so hard to actually, like you said, open yourself up because it could potentially mean more hurt versus when you have your walls up. Walls is nothing penetrating, but it's also I imagine, very lonely as well.
Yeah. Very isolating, correct?
Yeah. Absolutely. And so I absolutely love that because I know there are so many people who, they'll go to maybe someone instead seeking help from someone who's almost going to like stir the pot instead. And because it can feel really good. And I think that it's not to say that that doesn't have a purpose, but acknowledging perhaps that purpose, that this is someone who's going to stir the pot and be like, yeah, you're doing everything right. Versus maybe, like you said, someone who's going to tell you like when, like, hey, maybe there's some room for flexibility here that you're currently, like you said, maybe closed off to, and let's look at that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So that's such a good piece, and I appreciate that you brought that up. And it sounds like it's been serving you well on your journey to your growing and kind of doing something different. It sounds like.
Yeah.
How's that as far as, because it sounds like, and let me know if I'm way off base here, that some of these patterns were almost kind of intergenerational, what the kids say these days, intergenerational trauma. And then it sounds like, you've made this kind of conscious choice to, hi, to stop it, or to at least stop some of the things that you've built now an awareness of. Is that accurate? Has that been your experience?
Yes, that's very accurate. As the kids say these days, I did not inherit generational wealth. I inherited generational trauma, unfortunately. Right. But it's definitely something, patterns that I saw with my parents again, and again, like I said, we have to give them grace because they were not raised in a way that anyone would particularly like to be raised. But it's definitely patterns that I noticed in my mother, who I still often see and spend time with. And it's one of those things, again, you just have to like intentionally address. And like I said, I'm still not, it's always a work in progress. And it's one of those things that I always say, it's a work in progress. And you have to be able to just kind of humble yourself and be like, man, I really need to work on these areas. I'm not doing well in these areas. I need to work on my communication better. I have to work on, not being so offensive, but definitely patterns that I've noticed in my family with my sisters. I have 4 sisters.
Okay.
Things that I've, noticed with them. And again, it's just something that needs to be addressed. Because you can decide not to, and you can just continue living your life that way. Not fun.
Yeah. And absolutely, I don't know how many people I've heard of, well, this is all I know, so this is what I do. And absolutely, that is also, though, I think important to highlight, that's still a choice.
Correct. That's one thing that we all have, regardless of where we are in life, it's choice. And you can choose to stay the way you've always been. You can stay with the same patterns, the same relationships you've chosen to be in, And then, choosing to change is not easy. It's going to be difficult. Like I said, I spent several years, outside of relationships, choosing to be single, choosing to work on addressing behaviors, choosing to, stay out of relationships that I knew would not be good for me, because I knew that I would end up, doing things that I was not going to be happy about. And it's one of those things. I see often this quote or something, I'm not really sure what it is, but it says, every choice you make, are you making steps towards the life that you want? Is this helping you get your goal? Like, it's that easy. Being angry, being in a relationship, doing these sort of patterns, spending all your money, doing, regardless, is this going to help you get to your end goal? And that's a choice you can make.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, I chose to be single. I chose to go to therapy. I chose to work on these patterns because I'm like, I don't want to be in these types of relationships anymore. I don't want to be, I don't want these behaviors anymore. So it's a choice. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And what I like about what you just said is it sounds like it takes one, again, going back to that conscious, right, decision to sit back and to, it sounds like maybe even look at what are my end goals and really kind of, taking that zoomed out version first, and then being able to say, okay, is, like you said, being single, even though maybe everything in me says this is extremely uncomfortable. I heard you mention kind of your patterns, you liked that dopamine hit. And so I imagine when you're single, you're not necessarily getting some of that. And so that's incredibly uncomfortable and no, my brain is telling me I want these things, I need these things. And so then to kind of make that choice to, like you said, be intentionally single, looking at that big picture of, if I do this, it does allow me space and time to work on me, it sounds like, and choosing that discomfort versus maybe some of this other discomfort that you had been kind of in. Is that accurate?
Yes, and it's very much of the whole like temporary, the quick satisfaction versus, a longer lasting satisfaction. For me, oh man, that was difficult. You almost have, you retrain yourself, you retrain your routines, you retrain your brain ultimately. But honestly, a lot of it, I had issues, a lot of it was social media. So I went off social media for a while because I felt like that was affecting a lot of my views on relationships, on, being single, on just a lot of things in social media, I think, were affecting my views on that. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to take a break from social media. And then I almost went back to like, what were things that I liked to do when I was a kid? I liked to read. I liked music. I like, you just kind of have to find other things that you're like, well, I like to do this too. So then I started writing, I started reading, I started doing, me and my kids spent a lot of time outside. We were traveling a lot more. You just kind of change your focus, because I feel like sometimes, we're all in this, you almost have like blinders on, and it's, I have to find this relationship. I have to do this. I have to, find a partner. And it's like, there's more to life. And it's okay, it's not an advert, needing to find a partner if you're a single parent. It's okay either way. For me, and, my partner knows this too, like I'm okay with being with my partner. I love my partner. I'm also going to be okay if I'm a single parent, alone with my kids. So it's once I realized that would be okay either way, I'm like, okay, that's when I thought I was ready to maybe get into a relationship or look for a partner, because I knew that I would be content regardless. I knew I'd be content, I'd be content alone with my kids. I'd be content finding a companion who I enjoy spending time with.
And I love that. That's such a wonderful shift of it. It sounds like for you, that readiness was looking at a relationship instead of something I need to be complete. It was, this is a bonus. I'm already complete and content. having a relationship would just be a bonus to that, but I don't need it. Is that
Correct.
what I heard?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Once I hit that, and it wasn't like a aha moment. It was more of, I think maybe I was out with my parents. We went out to eat, and I was third wheeling, as they say. But I was out eating with my parents, and my stepdad had made a comment, and I said, I'm like, well, I would be okay if this was the rest of my life, like hanging out with you guys and my kids, and just kind of doing what I'm doing, having the routine I currently have. I think he mentioned something about like me being like the single cat, like with the cats and everything.
Okay, like a cat lady.
Yeah, the cat lady, and I'm like, you know what? I'm okay with that. I'm
That's
really
fine.
okay with that. That's fine. If I find a cat dad, cool. If not, that's okay. And that's when I realized, I'm like, you know what? It's okay. Everything's gonna be fine.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I know you mentioned that maybe necessarily wasn't um, a direct aha moment, but I am really curious though, because it sounds like this is a shift that you intentionally made, going back to that idea of making a decision. And so was there a catalyst for you that was your aha moment that something's got to be different?
Um, well, yes, with my divorce, um, during my divorce, or while I was in the process of, getting divorced, I was in a very casual relationship. This was right before COVID happened.
Okay.
I was in a casual relationship, and we kind of ended things, and I ended up pregnant, and I was like, I can't keep doing like this is not what I wanted for my kids. This is not what I want for my life, and it's strange, I remember sitting in the courtroom, and they were finalizing my divorce, and I'm sitting here pregnant, and I remember the judge said something about like, oh, I see you're pregnant. Do you want to do a paternity test for, the defendant or whatever? And I said, no, it's okay. Like, I know it's not, his. And I'm just like, this is not a situation anyone is just like, that's what I want to do with what in my life,
Yeah.
So I just recall feeling, I can close my eyes, and I know like that feeling when I was sitting there, and I was just like, I don't ever want to do this again. I don't ever want to be in this kind of position. My youngest daughter, her dad is not involved like at all. And, I'm like, I just don't want to put a child in this position ever again. So that's pretty much when I decided, I'm like, you know what? I can't, we're going to work on things.
Mm-hmm.
And if I have to do this alone, I will do it alone. But it's, it's the catalyst for me was sitting in that courtroom. And, I laugh about it now because I have to laugh about it, but it's just, looking back, and it's one of those things, when you get divorced or certain situations happen in your life, or when people that I meet find out, that my three kids have three different fathers, I can see their face change. They're like, oh, and I'm like, yeah, I'm that person. But and I say it in a way jokingly, but also in a way like, you know what? Nobody plans for this stuff. I think everyone hopes that they're in a healthy, long-lasting relationship. Everybody wants that love, but it takes work,
Yeah.
and that's something that I've realized. It takes addressing, your mental health issues. It takes addressing the patterns you've noticed, in yourself and in relationships. It takes intentionality of going in and getting the help that you need. But yeah, that was my catalyst. I'm like, I am not doing this again. My
Yeah.
my kids, thankfully, they're just very they're so gracious, and they're so funny and sweet and kind, and I'm like, I'm just so thankful for all of them, regardless of how I got them. But definitely
Yeah.
that was the catalyst.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing that. And I wanted to highlight, because I heard you mention, that when people find out that, there might be that facial change, But like you said, this isn't, I don't think anybody goes into their life going, this is what I wanted, especially when they're, struggling. And so being able to, like you
Exactly.
said, have that grace and suspend the judgment. I feel like we're so good as a society of just like jumping into judgment, all in. I'm like, I'm just going to judge you. And it's like you said, this isn't necessarily, I don't think people consciously choose hardship or struggle. And so why judge them like it is, something that, they're excited about too. Instead, like, hey, what can I do to support you? And see, are they wanting to change? And maybe they do just need a little bit of that safe space to be able to explore something different.
Yes, yes. And I just want to highlight, for me personally, how important it has been to have a sense of humor, because it's so important for me. I joke around with people, when they see pictures of my kids, and, my older two look more like me, and my daughter is like blonde with green eyes. And, it's just one of those, I'm like, yeah, she's my lighter skinned child, but she's my spiciest child. You know what I'm saying? Like so it's very important to just kind of, relax and have a sense of humor. That's been I think that's what's helped me as well get through all of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And not necessarily taking yourself too seriously, because otherwise that, like you said, that could get you into trouble just, when things are a little bit more difficult. So
yeah.
I know you shared that wonderful resource with us at the beginning. Were there any other resources or supports that you found along your journey that were very helpful to you that, maybe others would find some use in as well?
Well, I am a big fan of, YouTube and Instagram. Again, just making sure you vet, through a lot of the videos. But if I find therapists or people that are licensed, I find them online, like for what you're doing, for example, like being able to, send and show videos and tips and this and that. I don't have anyone specifically, but that's especially when I was scared when I started my journey on, mental health. I didn't want to just jump in and find someone right away. So I would look through videos, and, I found a couple of therapists, on YouTube, and they're like, these are 5 tips to help you, when you're upset or when you're dealing with your kids, or if you're trying to, I was a big fan of those. But again, just vetting them and making sure that, they're licensed. And typically you can tell just by watching the video and looking them up. I always kind of looked up their name online and just making sure they were someone who, was educated and licensed. But because sometimes that's hard, taking that first step is usually so hard for people. And sometimes it's easier to just find, a doctor or someone on Instagram or on YouTube, and you kind of look through their videos, or on TikTok. And it's just nice to kind of look through the videos and be like, oh yeah, that's how I am, or I can relate to that. Or sometimes that's like the first step, but that's what I did. And then it kind of helped ease me into finding someone locally, someone, a licensed counselor, to help me. But
wonderful. So I think that's super helpful. And like you said, because it is a really big step to take. And so finding those ways, like you said, for yourself of what's going to help you kind of ease into that and maybe make it a little bit of a smoother transition, if you will. All right. So one of my favorite questions, last question kind of for you, if you did have access to a DeLorean, and you could go back in time, is there anything that you would say to yourself, share with yourself kind of back then?
Oh, that's such a good question. If I could go back and tell my younger self, something, I would say, don't be afraid of your goals or your dreams. Like, just kind of go for it. I think I was very afraid. I was very afraid of failing. I was
Yeah.
very much a people pleaser. So I would probably say something like, just go for it. Like, don't be afraid of failing. And just, you are enough. You don't need someone to complete you.
Mm-hmm.
That would be my two biggest points.
Yeah. And I think that those are great points and great reminders for everyone as well. Julie, thank you so much for being willing to talk to me again, and share your story and share this recipe. I know I'm super excited to share it with my family. So thank you for giving me that weigh in. I had never made it before, so thank you.
No worries.
And thank you. Yes. And thank you for being willing to be so open with us. I was going to say me, but really it's much bigger than me. So thank you for being willing to be vulnerable, and share that piece, because I know it's not something that our society is normalized talking about yet. That's that's what I'm working on. But I appreciate you very, very much.
Yeah, no problem. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to see you again.
Yes.
I just, any way, shape, or form that I can get in contact with people whom I've made friends with and have, spent time with. It's so nice to spend time with and talk to you. So thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And thank all of you for listening in today. We'll see you next time. If you or anyone that you know is struggling with any of the topics that we discussed in today's episode, make sure to check out our show notes for support and resources. You can get help. Thanks again for joining us on today's episode of The Real Family Eats. If you're a parent ready to share your real life parenting story, make sure to reach out to us in our website found in the show notes. And that goes for today's recipe, social medias, support, and resources. All of that can be found in our show notes. So make sure to check them out. And make sure to follow, like, share, subscribe, and stay up to date on all things The Real Family Eats. I hope you'll join us next time for more food for thought and thoughtful food. Enjoy your eats.